Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. I'm glad you could join me because I've got a really good one here tonight. You know, I read the books of all the authors that I do, that I interview, and I insist on doing that. But this book that we're going to talk about tonight, which is Judaism Without Tribalism, a guide to being a blessing to all, I even read the appendixes, and I found them to be as enlightening as well. So if I have jumped into this book as deeply as that, you must know it touched me profoundly, and is probably a book that I will give as gifts and definitely read through again and again, because I have found it enlightening, and it has been a book that has brought questions to my mind, and it answers them, and it was a joy to read. This book investigates Judaism at its best and sanest. It strips away outdated and harmful beliefs that have accrued over the centuries and returns to the essential truths that are too often ignored in favor of tradition, tribal identity, or the claims of the powerful. The result is a vibrant Judaism for the 21st century and beyond, a Judaism that draws deeply from history and scripture, yet addresses the unmet needs of the present and the future. It's a Judaism that is open and accessible to everyone, and that means everyone. Judaism Without Tribalism is a call to be a light to the nations and a blessing to all the people of earth. It's a Judaism free from legalism and tribalism, a Judaism that refuses to serve patriarchy and power. Written by one of today's most respected and most unconventional Jewish thinkers, Judaism Without Tribalism is a manifesto, an invitation to completeness, and a call for inner and outer spiritual revolution. It's also a deeply practical guide to living authentically, breath by breath, and day to day, for everyone of every belief. Rabbi Shapiro is an award-winning author of over 24 books on religion and spirituality. A congregational rabbi for 20 years, he currently co-directs One River Wisdom School, blogs at rabbiremi.blogspot.com, writes a regular column for Spirituality and Health magazine called Roadside Assistance for the Spiritual Traveler, and hosts the weekly internet radio show, How to Be a Holy Rascal, on Unity Online Radio. And in his spare time, he probably does other stuff too, but it feels like with all that he has going, there's always room for something more, I would hazard a guess. Welcome to the show, Rabbi Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It's a delight to be here.
Well, I'm just thrilled that you're here because I have bunches of questions, and as I said before we came on the air, I grew up in a mostly Jewish neighborhood and spent 40 years deep in their traditions and everything, and your book has shown me a whole other side of Judaism, and I find that it is that everything that you have here is appropriate for everyone of every culture of every religion. I mean, Judaism has a corner on the market because you wrote the book, but it has material for everybody to utilize and use and enhance their lives, especially because so many people are now looking for the light within their life, within themselves.
Well, I think that religion is a human creation. I don't think God creates religions. And because it's a human creation, I think every religion has something to offer all of us. And
absolutely.
I think it's a mistake to limit yourself to one religion. I mean, I was born Jewish. I grew up Jewish. Judaism is my foundational faith, I guess you'd say. But since I was in high school, I studied Hinduism and Buddhism. I've been initiated into different traditions so I can go more deeply into them. I mean, I was a professor of world religions for a decade. So I think religion is a gift to humanity. And though, Judaism sort of belongs to the Jews, I know that's what you might say, it's really a gift to humanity itself. It's the Jewish gift to humankind. And you could say the same about Islam. It's the Muslim gift to humankind. So I think you could say that about every religion. And I think if we're wise, we ought to look at all of them and learn from all of them.
I agree. What I have found is most of the religions that I have looked into, and I tried on many of them myself, they eventually felt like they were boxing me in. And so I now call myself almost a universalist because I find value in all of them, but I don't want to just be labeled as one or another because there's so much wisdom and beauty in all of them that I want to take part in all of those aspects of life that they do provide. I think that what I found with your book was that of all of the practices that I have looked into, Judaism, as you have written it, is the only one that seems to have truly evolved into the 21st century with a wonderful term you call turning the Torah.
Yeah, we could talk about that, but I think we should be clear that if you found that Judaism entered the 21st century through my book, it's because of me, not that Judaism has evolved. Judaism is huge. It's not. I'm not reporting on Judaism as a corporate thing. This is just my take on Judaism. You go to any religion and you end up in a box if you study with the people who own the box, because that's, you got to look to see where the power is and where the money is, and that's always in the box. So when I studied Catholicism, for example, I studied with the Catholic mystics because they don't care about the box. They don't care about you have to become a Catholic and you have to take communion, otherwise you're going to go to hell. I mean, they don't care about that. That's just not in their radar. So you study with the mystics. You study with the Protestant mystics and the Sufis and those aspects of Hinduism and Buddhism that it's not about doing it according to some organized way, some traditional way that cannot be violated. when you deal with the mystics, you're dealing with the heart of a tradition, and there's never a box. Maybe there's an arrow pointing some direction, but when you deal with mystics from different traditions, you discover that arrow is always pointing in the same direction. All the mystic arrows are pointing in the same direction, and that's the kind of Judaism I'm interested in, that more mystical aspect. And by mystical, I don't mean Kabbalistic specifically, because that's another box. You can get all wrapped up in the Kabbalah, and they don't, and you're stuck in that box. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mystics who realize what we say in Yiddish, alles ist Gott, that everything is the divine. And, it's not a spiritual journey. There's no place to go. It's about realizing that you are a manifesting of the divine, and everything is a manifesting of the divine. And if you don't like the word divine, you can call it consciousness or reality or whatever you want to call it. But everything is it right now. There's no place to go. There's nothing you lack. There's nothing you need. All you have to do is be aware of what's happening within you and around you. But religions that are those aspects of religions that are box oriented, they don't want you to know that. When Jesus says the kingdom is within you and around you, nobody wants to take that seriously, because then I don't need the church.
Right. Well, I think what I admire the most is that with Judaism especially, there is the study of it, and then there is the debate and questioning. And in other areas of religious cultures that I have been a part of, questioning and debating were not allowed. Now, if you're talking the mystics, of course they are, but I haven't had the pleasure of being with many of the mystics of the different religions, so that what I've experienced has been the box, and it's you don't question. This is it. This is this is what you do. This is what you say. This is how you say it. And if you don't, you go to hell. So I love the questioning. I love the debate. I love the study. That to me is wonderful. That means people are thinking, and part of the purpose.
Absolutely.
Part of the purpose of this show is to put material out there so people can listen to it, debate about it, question it, say that's a bunch of junk, and then go and look to see if it's true or not. If I can make one person think every evening when I do a show, my job here is done. And it's wake up and pay attention, research, do some work on finding some of the truth that's out there and some of the wonderful material that's there. So
I'm not sure
lovely
if you
time
can make anybody think. I don't know if you can make anybody think. I think you can find the people who are already thinking and offer them something new to think about. But I don't know if you can make somebody think. But your notion about... Go ahead.
If you offend them deeply enough, they'll think.
Oh, okay. Let's try to do that. But, your idea about argument is, first of all, in Judaism, it's central to the culture. We have a term in Hebrew, not that anyone's going to remember that, but it's machlochet l'shem shemayim. We argue for the sake of heaven. We argue for the sake of truth, because we believe that, that through argument, and it's not, argument like purposeless argument or egoic argument, I'm going to win at all costs. It's debate, it's questioning, it's, deep exploration done with another person, where the goal of the conversation, and the conversation can get heated, but the goal of the argument or the conversation is to push beyond whatever boxes you and I are stuck in. And that's our job, is I push you and you push me, and we see if we can get beyond our limits and see what else there is if we can get beyond the box. That's the one thing I love most about Judaism, and the one thing I'm the most proud of as a Jew. I'll tell you a story, if I may. Years
Sure.
ago, though I can't tell you exactly how many because I don't remember, but years ago I was invited to India for the 150th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's birthday. And it was a big celebration in New Delhi at the Ramakrishna Math, one of the big Ramakrishna centers that Swami Vivekananda had established. And the Dalai Lama was the keynote speaker, and they had invited a number of spiritual teachers from around the world. And all of us were given the same topic. And the topic was based on a talk that Swami Vivekananda gave in 1892, 94, now I can't remember, at the very first Parliament of the World's Religions that was held in Chicago, Illinois. And at the Parliament, he said that something like, I'm not quoting him, but something like, every religion brings something unique to the wisdom feast. That's not his word, that's mine. Brings something unique to the wisdom feast of humanity. And so the question that was posed to each speaker was, what does your tradition bring? What's the unique thing that your tradition brings? And my talk was about this arguing for the sake of heaven, that we are encouraged to challenge the tradition, to challenge the teachings and the texts and our sages in order to go more deep into what the possibilities are. Because you can never reach an ultimate truth. You're always moving toward it, but you can't actually grasp it. So the argument moves you in that direction. And when I finished the talk, I mean, it's India, so there were thousands of people present. When I finished the talk, dozens of swamis came up to talk with me afterward, and they were so impressed that a religion could make room for this kind of radical questioning and radical doubt. Because they were telling me, in their tradition, you couldn't do that, that there were set things that your guru said that you could not question. Now, I've been part of the Ramakrishna tradition for quite a while, but I'm not a Swami, and my reading in that tradition doesn't suggest that at all, that people did question and continue to question, and the Swamis I know are very much about questioning and challenging and deepening their understanding. But anyway, that's what they told me. But the fact that, asked what was the one thing that Judaism brings to humanity, it's this love of spiritual argument. And it's a deeply held spiritual practice in Judaism. And, I think every tradition would benefit from adapting that to their own religious way of engaging with text.
Oh, I agree with you. And, it's in reading, especially the Bible, which is put together by a whole bunch of people, and they all had agendas and stuff like that. It's hard to grasp exactly what the truth is that they're talking about, because they are creating a religion while they're writing, and therefore, what was it that was creating religion as opposed to the actual truth they were trying to share with humanity? So there's constantly that, why is it this way? Why do you say it this way? And so there's there's confusion, and yet with the Torah, it's beautiful. I mean, we share the same material for a great deal. So
sure,
I
but it's
found,
the same thing. The Torah is written by people also. I mean, and mostly men, right? I mean, it's mostly written by men. So, and they all had an agenda. So, it's all written by people with an agenda, and the agendas don't jibe. So sometimes you read something that takes you in one direction, and sometimes you read something that takes you in a different direction. I mean, you find things that are all about peace and love and compassion, and then you find places where God says, regarding the Amalekite people, wipe out every man, woman, child, and cow. So what is it? Is it justice and compassion, or is it genocide? Well, it depends on, who wrote it and what they wrote it for. So if they were writing to get the people stirred up for war, they wrote one thing, and they had God say one, a warlike thing. And if they were writing to establish a just society, they had God say something else. So that's why the Bible isn't, when people look at the Bible and they say, well, the truth is in there, that's not true. The Bible is a Rorschach test. The truth is in you. And if you find it in the Bible, it's because you're projecting something from yourself into the text and then having the text mirror it back to you. So that's why you can find people look at the Bible and they come out with such hateful things. I mean, people who, as Jews and Christians, can read the Bible and end up claiming that the Bible excuses horrible behavior, toward the people they don't like. And what they're really saying is, I want to do horrible things toward people, but I can't do it on my own authority, so I want the Bible to excuse my behavior. I want the God of the Bible to excuse my behavior. So I'm going to interpret the Bible in such a way so I can get away with doing whatever I want to do. And I'm going to say, hey, it's not my idea. It's God. But that's BS.
Yeah, in a lot of places you use the big G and the little g. And,
right.
And I do understand what you're saying, because in my opinion, that's exactly what it is. So you want to explain the difference between the big G and the little g, especially?
Yeah,
just the difference.
So, sometimes people come and say, you shouldn't use the word God at all because it's so confusing. So, and there's lots of words for God that I use instead of the word G-O-D. But in this book, I was playing around with capital G and lowercase g. The lowercase g God refers to any God invented by any people. So there's the Jewish God, the Christian God, the Hindu God, the Muslim God. These are all different gods unique to different civilizations. So when people come and say, like at an interfaith gathering, and someone says, well, we all worship the same God. First of all, that's false, and I'll tell you why in a second. But that's not true. We all worship the lowercase g God of our people. So the God of the Jews, no kids. Whereas the God of the Christian has a son. And if God doesn't have a son, then he's not God as far as Christians are concerned. So that can't be the same God. The God of the Muslims has no son. The God of the Muslims dictated the Holy Quran to Muhammad, through the angel Gabriel, peace be upon Muhammad. And the Jewish God didn't do that. The Christian God didn't do that. The God Krishna, is the hero and the sage of the Bhagavad Gita. The Jewish God doesn't know anything about the Bhagavad Gita, and neither does Allah of Islam or God of Christianity. So these are not the same God. They're all lowercase g gods of different cultures. And we should recognize that, and we should respect that. The capital G God is the God beyond religion. And then you go into the mystics, the God of the mystics, the God that is, fundamentally beyond naming. I mean, every religion has a name or has multiple names, and I'm comfortable with lots of them. But basically, in the opening verse of the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu writes something like, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. If you could replace it with God, the God that can be named, whether it's Allah or Yud-He, Vav-He in the Hebrew, or Krishna or Brahma or, whatever it is, the God that can be named is not the eternal God, is not the ultimate Godhead, because the ultimate is beyond language. So that's the distinction I'm trying to make with the capital G and the lowercase g. I'm not an atheist. I think there is a greater reality of which all beings are a manifestation. But and we have to, if we're going to talk about it, we have to talk about it some way. So we need metaphor. So there are certain words I like. I like the Hindu term Brahman. Speaks to me because they always talk about Brahman as the infinite, unnameable. When the mystics talk about Yud Hey Vav Hey in the Hebrew, which is not only, it's unpronounceable, so it's a name that cannot even be named. That works for me. So there's lots of ways of talking about it. But as for a metaphor, so people listening understand what I have in mind, think of, and this is a Hindu metaphor that I like, think of the capital G God as an infinite ocean, and all reality is are way, you and I, trees, plants, animals, are waves of that ocean. And there's no distinction between a wave and the ocean. No wave is all of the ocean, but the ocean is all of the wave. So I'm not all of God, but God is all of me. And that's my theology. And you can find that among the mystics of every tradition.
Yeah, my personal phrase that I use is the source of all creation.
Yeah. I also use something similar. I say the source and substance of all creation, because I want to make the connection that there's nothing separate from God.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty sure we agree.
I think we do.
To me, it's sometimes people talk about their God and someone else's God, and it's kind of like you just listen and you say okay, and you don't try to talk because anything I would have to say would probably either outrage or offend people, so I keep quiet in those particular situations. But I found in your book especially, there was so much of a feeling of making Judaism feel familiar and comfortable, and not something that was outside of my realm, but was really a part of my realm, and I never knew it. Which is how your writing made me feel as far as my belief system, and how it fit so nicely into so many of the things that you said. And I do want to go to turning the Torah, because that to me was, I love that phrase, and I love what it meant.
So tell me what you loved about it.
The fact that with each age we use different vocabularies, we use different inferences, it's a matter of bringing the ancient into a familiar frame of reference for today's world, so that we understand what they were trying to say.
Right.
And
or we can hear new things in ancient text.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one of my favorite examples of turning Torah, first of all, like you, I love the phrase, I love the image, because you can literally, and we won't go into this in any detail because it gets too in the weeds, but you can literally read a verse of Torah. Hebrew is read from right to left, so you can read it right to left, right? That's normal. But you could also read it left to right if you can make sense out of it. You can start in the middle and read to the outside. You can switch the letters around according to a specific formula. So you can switch, like you can take the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. We take any letter in the Hebrew alphabet and exchange it for its twin at the other end of the alphabet. So the first letter and the last letter are interchangeable. The second letter and the second to the last letter are interchangeable. And you can just flip the words that way if you can make sense out of it. So I'll give you another way of turning Torah that maybe people can relate to. So Torah, if you go and you pick up a Hebrew Bible at a bookstore, you'll see the consonants in block letters, and then below them are all these dots and dashes. Those are the vowels. The Bible, the Torah, was originally written without vowels. And if you go to a synagogue and you look at a Torah scroll that's hand printed, you find the consonants, the block letters, but you don't find the vowels underneath. And that's the original way it was written, without printed vowels. You don't get printed vowels, I think, until maybe the 1200s or something. And when you're a kid, and you're learning to read it, you learn to read it without vowels. And it's just a convention that this is the way you sound these things out. So you're literally, when you learn to read the Hebrew, you're literally breathing the meaning into the word, because the vowels are your breath. So if you had a what do they call it, character recognition software, and you just fed pieces of Torah from a scroll into that software, it would be gibberish because there's no vowels.
Yeah.
So the reader has to breathe the vowels in. So you can, when you're a kid and you're learning how to read it, you're taught to breathe certain vowels into certain words, and so you're all saying the same, reading the same thing out loud. But you're allowed to change the vowels if doing so gives you a new sense of what the verse might be saying. So there's this amazing rabbi, Reb Nachman of Breslov, who lived in the 1800s. And he's got thousands of teachings. But one of the ones that I find so profound, he takes the second half of the verse in Leviticus 19:18 that everyone knows, love your neighbor as yourself. And the Hebrew is ve'ahavta, and you shall love, l're'echa, your neighbor, kamocha, as yourself. And he says the word for neighbor in that verse is re, R-E apostrophe A-H. But the Hebrew is just two letters. It's a resh and an ayin. That gives you the R sound and the A sound. So rea, neighbor. He says you could take the same two letters, resh and ayin, and change the vowels and have the word ra. Ra means evil. So you could have the same verse. You don't change any of the letters, and you would pronounce it ve'ahavta, and you shall love, l'ra'echa, your evil, kamocha, as a part of yourself. And he says what the text could be saying. He's not saying it's an either or. In Judaism, it's always and. Here's another meaning, and here's another meaning, here's another meaning. But he's saying if you're creative in the way you turn the Torah, you'll find that one of the ways that the text is telling you, if you're going to love your neighbor, one of the prerequisites is to love your own shadow side. Now, he didn't say shadow because that's Carl Jung, and he wasn't even, he's way later. But Nachman is saying if you're going to love your neighbor, you have to first take ownership of your own dark side. Because if you don't, he says, you're going to project your own shadow, using modern terminology, you're going to project your own shadow onto your neighbor, and you'll hate your neighbor. So love your own evil, your own capacity, potential for evil, and then you'll find it easier to love your neighbor because you won't force the neighbor to carry your own dark side. I mean, it's brilliant. But unless you're free to play with the text and have the skills to do it, I mean, obviously, if you're not a Hebrew reader, then that one's lost in you. But the idea is still right, that you can just turn this text, turn the Bible over and over and over until you can find all these powerful, radical, new meanings in it. And that's not, knowing how you grow up, Barbara, that's not what you were allowed to do in church.
No. Just a question. When Hebrew began to be written, was it that they didn't have symbols for vowels, or why did they leave them out? I know you weren't there, but
No, you memorized them. They didn't print them. You just knew them. You're a little kid. You just, when you have this set of consonants, the word is pronounced, and they taught you, and you just remembered it. So the vowels were in your head, but not printed on a page. It's only when later, when they had printed Bibles, that they actually, on it with a printing press of some sort, that they actually printed the vowels. Otherwise, you just learned it as a kid.
I like it better this way. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you go to Israel and you get some little kid who's learning to read, they read without the vowels. They don't need them. They're just taught, this is how you say these words.
Wow.
So, but anyway, what were you going to say?
Well, see, what in my background I was given was, this is it. This is it. There's one meaning and one meaning only. And what I love about Judaism is that it gives you the freedom to try other things on for size and see if they apply and if there's wisdom there as well. And perhaps if there is hidden wisdom there, maybe it's for those that have gotten to a place where they're ready to look at alternatives and find a greater depth of meaning.
Absolutely. And you've actually hit on a fundamental rabbinic principle that goes back thousands of years. In the Talmud, which is the anthology of rabbinic teachings, the rabbis preserved, first orally and then they wrote it down, but they preserved all of the official teachings and then all of the arguments against the official teachings. And somebody asked the question, why are we having to because it was all memorized at first. Why do we have to memorize all the negative stuff? Someone says, let's do X, and everyone goes, okay, and then someone else, the minority opinion is, no, do something else. Why do we have to remember the minority opinion? And the answer is because the majority opinion is for today. Maybe another time this issue comes up and the majority opinion doesn't seem right, and we're going to have to switch, and the minority opinion is better. Times change, so we have to memorize everything. So, we don't throw anything away. You just keep adding to it. So it's not like, you're right, you're wrong. It's, it's all right, but we have to choose how to behave. So this is what makes sense to us today, that things could change. So, that's what keeps Judaism fresh, intellectually fresh. Behaviorally, it gets locked in. But, when it comes to study and philosophy and theology, it's very fluid.
Well, that's what I love about it. It has such a richness. It has a richness to it, and it's a richness that allows you to let it be flexible, so you can look at all sides of it and sideways and up and down and get a message any way you look at it, because there's truth everywhere. And some of the truths may be ones that will give you an aha moment. And I love those aha moments. It's like, oh my. Didn't see that one coming. Right. But so
no, I just to be fair, because I sort of.
Oh, he's being fair, and he decided. I bet he hit the button by accident. He seems to have taken a short break. So I must tell you that this book was so enlightening for me. I'm not going to I'm going to add a lot of it to the richness of my own spiritual philosophies, because it wakes you up. It takes you into new levels of understanding of yourself. It allows you to question some things and look at things differently. And the more and more deeply that I read, the more I understood that here was a culture that I didn't really know as well as I would have liked to. Here's a people that had a richness of material and wisdom that I had not paid attention to, and I'm really sorry I hadn't, because there's so much there. And as soon as he comes back, we'll get into some of the other things that are there, because they stretched me in ways that I was very, very delighted to go in, and opened doors that gave me insight into aspects of life and how to live it, and that these people were really, their cause in life was to be a blessing to everyone, to be a blessing, to live as a blessing. And I felt very strongly that I had probably misunderstood. As I said before, I grew up in a very traditional Orthodox Jewish community, and so my understanding was broadened greatly by reading this book. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm back. I
Rabbi?
was disconnected somehow.
Have
yeah,
a nice trip.
Barbara, can you hear me now? Yeah, I don't know what
We're
happened. We
set.
got disconnected. Okay,
Yeah,
so I don't know
stopped
where
in
we left
mid-sentence.
off, but yeah, well, I don't know what the sentence was, so sorry about that.
That's
but
okay.
we got disconnected.
So I think that what I really want to open people's minds to, or understanding, is that Judaism is, as we said before we went on the air, it's more than a religion and a culture, and it's so much more and greater than just Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, my teacher, Mordecai Kaplan, called Judaism a civilization, and by which he meant that it includes multiple cultures. I mean, it's not even, most people in the United States, when they think of Jews, they think of European Jews, and that's just a small one slice of Judaism. There's Jews from India, there's Jews from Africa, there's Jews from Arabic countries, Spanish Jews. We have multiple languages. There's Yiddish, there's Hebrew, there's Judeo-Arabic. So it's multilingual, multicultural, multiracial. We have different cuisines. If you're looking for one thing, and it's hard to find one thing that ties all these elements of Jewish civilization together, I would say it's the story of the Exodus. That it's not historically accurate that all Jews were enslaved in Egypt. I mean, that's not even remotely true. But we don't even know if any Jews were enslaved in Egypt, but certainly not all Jews. But the story we tell ourselves is that we were enslaved in Egypt, and then we were liberated from Egypt, and then we wandered around in Sinai, and we ended up in Canaan, and then we took over Canaan and started our evolution as a nation state and all the rest of that. But so we tell that story, and the story is incorporated into the Hebrew scripture. So I guess you'd say, since all Jews from all these diverse cultures read that text, that probably is what ties us together. At least I like that idea, that we're a people of that story, a people of the text. Though I know a lot of Jews who would say, no, that's ridiculous, that most Jews don't know the text, so you can't say we're tied together by the text, so who knows. But it's a very diverse thing, and religion is only a part of it, because my guess is most Jews, and you can start, with regardless of what group we're talking about, Sephardic, Spanish, Judeo, the Jews from Mizrahi, the Eastern Jews, the Arabic Jews, and whatever Iraqi Jews, whatever Jews we're talking about, I think most Jews are probably not religious primarily. They probably identify in some other way. So you can't even say, Judaism includes a religion that's called Judaism, but there's no one way of understanding that. And many, if not most Jews that's not even the center of who they are as Jews. So it's a difficult thing. If you're a Christian and you say, well, I'm a Christian because I believe a certain thing, and if I didn't believe that thing, I wouldn't be a Christian, that doesn't apply to Jews. Because Jews can say, I'm a Jew because my mother was Jewish, or I grew up in a Jewish community and I do X, Y, and Z, but no, I don't believe anything. You know what I mean? It's so difficult to categorize Jews in that Christian way of, it's belief. That's what makes me a Christian.
Yeah, I got it.
Can't really say that about Jews.
Although, I did find that it feels like the purpose of their life, the drive of their life, is being a blessing, and I got that in a lot of places in the book that it's part of their. Yeah. It
should be, Barbara. I don't know if it is or not. But yeah, there's this part of the story where God calls to Abraham and Sarah. They're called Avram and Sarai before they get the full Abraham and Sarah name change. And God says, get out of Dodge. Just leave your house, leave your country, leave your kin, get out of your parents' house and go to a place I will show you. And then blah, 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 blah. And then this is Genesis 12, verses 1 and 2. And then in verse 3, God tells you why you're going. And then God says, basically what I want you to do is to be, and there's different ways to translate the verse, but I like the translation that says you'll be a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. And I like that all the families of the earth. And it says all of them. It doesn't say Jewish families because there are no Jews yet. Abraham and Sarah were the first one. So you'll be a blessing to all the families of the earth. And in my reading, all the families means human and otherwise. That to me is the mission of, that's the call to Abraham and Sarah, so that's the call to all Jews, that ultimately we're to be a mission, we're to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. I'm not saying we are. To me, that's the mission we're supposed to live up to. I'm not saying we do that even remotely, but that's the call.
Well, it makes sense to everyone that the purpose of being here is to be a blessing, to be a loving, contributing member of society, to help others, and to be, it's called family of man because we are a family. Though, like with most families, you don't like everybody. So. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you'd think so. You'd hope so. One of the things that, it's like you said earlier, the Bible's written by different people, and they all have different agendas. But if you look at Genesis 1, you get the first creation story. It's not the first one that's written, but it's the first one you read in the book. And in Genesis 1, people are created after everything else, and everything else is flourishing. God keeps saying, "Oh, it's good, everything's going great," and almost like an afterthought, God says, "Oh, let's make humans in our image and after our likeness." But there's no point to humans. We have nothing to do. The earth is flourishing. There's animals and they're doing fine, and there's fish and they're doing fine, and there's birds and they're doing fine, and the trees and everything is perfect. So God creates people, and to me it's a story, not history, but in the story, God creates people, and then what do you do with them? So God says, be fruitful and multiply and run the place. Have dominion over the animals and the fish and nature and all of that. So God creates people to manage a system that doesn't need managing, and so we ruin it. In Genesis 2, which is actually most likely the older story, even though it comes second in the book, in Genesis 2, it's a very different creation story. You don't get the 6 days of creation. In Genesis 2, it says nothing is growing because 2 things are missing. There's no water and there's no caretaker. So the first thing that God does in the second story is cause water to come up from the earth, like springs, and everything gets watered that way. And then God takes the damp earth and God creates the first human being, literally from the earth. And if you know the Hebrew, the word for earth is Adamah, Adamah. And God creates the first human, Adam, Adam, from the Adamah. So, in English, sadly, it says God creates man from the earth, and you don't get the connection. But it should be God creates the earthling from the earth. So, and then God, what's the purpose? Not to have dominion, but to serve and to protect. And the word it's like to be the gardener, to be the caretaker. So God creates water and God creates the gardener, and then everything's going to grow. And the job of the human is to serve life. And the word that's used for serve is the same word. I won't bother with the Hebrew, but it's the same word that's used for worship in Hebrew. So that your act of serving life is an act of divine worship. So when I care for my neighbor, it's an act of worshiping God. When I care for animals, when I care for nature, when I'm a blessing to all the families of the earth, human and otherwise, that's my way to worship God. I mean, it's all built into the Bible if we read it properly. And you have a choice as human beings. We can either be Genesis 1 and dominate and ruin the place. And we just learned from the latest study, we've got 9 years to get our act together, and we won't fix it. So we've taken Genesis 1 as our model, at least in the West, and it's infected the entire planet. So we've done the domination, taken the domination road, and we're just destroying everything. Or we could have followed Genesis 2 and become caretakers, which we now know is the smarter way to go, but it may be too late. But whether it's too late or not, you still have that choice. And this book, Judaism Without Tribalism, is a call for Jews anyway, the Genesis 2 choice. But I think everyone needs to make the Genesis 2 choice, to be caretakers rather than dominators.
I think that especially today in these times of turmoil and upheaval and stuff like that many people I am finding are looking for, what's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And I think you've got it nailed down. It's to protect, and it's to enrich, and it's to serve a higher cause. And in serving the higher cause, you're protecting and you're serving your fellow man. And I think that so many people just, it's like, don't be ridiculous. That's silly and stupid and too simple. And the reality is, I think it is very simple. It's a matter of loving and taking care of. And, just recently I was talking to people about, this, how can I afford to buy presents for Christmas and stuff like that? And my comment back was the most precious thing you have is time. Why don't you just give time to people you love and care and spend time listening to them and being with them, because that's the most precious thing you've got. And if you share that, there's no greater gift. And, they just look at me like I'm crazy, but it's true. I don't believe we're here to gather toys and compare bank accounts. I think we're here to learn something, and I think we're here to learn compassion and love. Some more easily than others.
What is wrong with you, Barbara? This is a capitalist country. You're here to buy stuff and buy more stuff.
But that has no meaning. When my mother
if you're 7 years old, my grandson just asked me yesterday. He goes, "When's Hanukkah?" And I told him, and he says, "It's 8 days, right?" And I said, "Yeah." That's like 8 nights of presents, right? And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, I can't wait."
Oh my goodness. Well, I can remember some of my friends that when I said, you get 8 days of presents, and somebody said, "Yeah, I get socks one night, I get a shirt another night."
That's how it works. But he doesn't even care. Socks! If it has a dinosaur on it, he's very happy.
Well. To be young.
Yeah.
But I think you brought up you brought up Hanukkah, and you have a section in your book about the menorah, and I know that there is a given text that is usually read at the lighting of each of the candles, and you have put your own spin on the text, which I think is beautiful. And I really am going to go out and find myself a menorah and use your phrases, because what it does is it gives it asks a question, and it's a good question, and you can spend a day meditating on it and answering it internally, and then you get another question the next night, and it's a wonderful way of taking stock of where you are within yourself at this point in time.
I think that's what all holidays are for. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, that's at their heart. They're all about asking you to ask questions about yourself, your life, and what are you living for, and how's it going? So I appreciate that. And I think, anybody could pick up these holidays. We have this thing, what's it called? Cultural appropriation. Okay, you're not a Jew, Barbara. You can't do Hanukkah. My feeling is, are you kidding? If this speaks to you, go do Hanukkah. Go get a menorah. I mean, it's ridiculous to say, no, she's not Jewish, she can't do it. And the same would go if you're Jewish and you want to celebrate Christmas, or you want to celebrate, Hindu Diwali, or, I have such, I wouldn't call it envy. I have such respect for my friends who are imams who do Ramadan, who fast during the day in the month, throughout the month of Ramadan. I mean, I could barely get through one day of Yom Kippur, and that's just basically skipping breakfast and lunch. To do that every day, that just seems too intense for me. But, I was once, I don't know if it was in the United States or maybe it was in Turkey. I don't know where I was, but I was studying with the Sufi teachers, and they were talking about Ramadan, and they said, and this is not really necessarily a mystic thing, this may be more mainstream Islam, but they said, yeah, you don't eat, but the real fast is fasting from anger, fasting from gossiping, fasting from negativity. And every day you try to live the day without those negative behaviors. And if you can do that for a month, You might find it easier to then do it for another month and then a third month. That's the real work of these holidays. Like Passover time. The way I grew up in an Orthodox home. The big thing was you don't eat anything with leaven in it, or not just eat. So, lipstick. My mom would have to get special kosher for Passover lipstick because her non-Passover lipstick had some product in it that was made with leaven. I don't know anything about how lipstick is made, but she had to get lipstick that was kosher for Passover, and it was all about that. So all the food that you bought, all the stuff that you used had to be certified that it was kosher for Passover. But and I do that. I still do that during the week of Passover. But the meaning of the leavened products was we were never taught when I was a kid. Why? We just didn't do it, right? Because they ate matzah, and so matzah has no leaven, so we get rid of leaven throughout the house and throughout the week. But the meaning of it is so much more interesting. In those days, ancient times, you leavened bread by using sourdough. And so the leaven symbolizes sourness. And what you're really trying to do is you spend a week trying to identify and eliminate the sourness in your life. And every time you don't eat leaven, you're supposed to be reminded, okay, I'm not eating this piece of bread because it has leaven in it, but where else am I ingesting sourness? Where am I putting sourness out into the world today? I should not do that. It's Passover. Where can I stop, making the world and myself sour? And that's the real work of Passover, not just avoiding bagels and, pie. So it makes the holidays so much more interesting. And you could do that for every holiday, for every religion. You're humanizing it and spiritualizing it and making it relevant to your life in the moment that the holiday is actually happening. And every year it's going to be new and fresh because you're wrestling with these issues perennially.
Well, I think that's the one thing that I have found has run rampant through society these days is that, these are holidays that are meant to be of a spiritual nature, and most people, they go to church on Christmas Eve, and it's celebrating the birth of Christ, which didn't happen in December, but it's there's more to the story. There's more to the purpose, and what did that mean to me today? And so that they're not getting to the real meat of the purpose of the holiday, and that does bother me greatly because there's so much more there to look at, to apply to your life, to make adjustments to your life, and to celebrate your life and to help you help other people too. I think that these holidays are meant to get you to a place where you are more compassionate towards your fellow man, and I'm not really seeing that happen.
Yeah, well,
maybe I don't get out
true.
enough. I don't know, but I do have the TV on from time to time, and it sure doesn't look it, and it's a little scary. Yeah. But you did there is one. There's one holiday that I would love you to talk about because the year of Jubilee. I like a lot, and it's not one that's new to me, but some of the intricacies of it are new to me. So I knew what a year of Jubilee was. It was every 7 years, but what it meant and what they did, if they really were adhering to the rules, was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so every 7 years you have a sabbatical year, which is when you let the land lay fallow. But every 7 sets of 7 years is this Jubilee year where you let the society go back to its original equilibrium, maybe you might say. It's, the way I always explained it was it's like a Monopoly game where you sit down to play Monopoly and everybody gets $200.
About to go, yeah.
Right? And at the end of the game, some people have, hotels on Boardwalk and Park Avenue, right? I guess that's what it's called. I don't remember. But, you have the big expensive property, Marvin Gardens, I think is that series of properties. And you win, and someone else has just got crap, or they're stuck in jail and they've got nothing and they lose. But at the end of the game, everybody puts all the hotels away and all the money goes back into the pot. And if you want to play again, everybody starts with the same $200 and you get to go around again. So the same idea with Jubilee is for 49 years, everyone starts out the same. And then for 49 years, you play this game of how can I succeed? How much money can I make? How much property can I own? How much wealth can I accrue? But at the end, and some people are going to win and some people are going to lose. Some people are going to have to sell their ancestral farms. This is an agricultural society. They're going to have to sell themselves into servitude. All the things that can happen to people. Some people are going to win. Some people are going to lose. But at the end of 49 years, everybody goes back. They get their lands back. They get their wealth back. All the debts are forgiven. And you start again. Everyone gets $200 and you start all over again. So it allows for winners and losers, but only up to the 49-year period. So you can't have this massive disequilibrium of money and power that goes on generation after generation, because it can only run for 2 generations. So it's a very radical idea. I don't know if that's what you were thinking of.
Yeah, I was. When they were speaking of it, so everybody has to start at the same time. Who determines when the starting point is and when the 49th year is?
Yeah, that's the rabbis. They decided the calendar. So we just had it. But no one does it anymore. That's the thing. No one does it. So, one of the things that I do is, rather than throw the holiday out, because, first of all, it only happens in the land of Israel, and you can't actually run a modern state this way. So Israel finds a way around it, which is necessary, but sort of sad. But I had this experience. I was lecturing at a educators conference, Jewish educators conference, years and years ago, and I'm sitting in the cafeteria, and this young woman comes up and says, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." So she sat down next to me, and she tells me this really harrowing story. And her story is that her parents were both survivors of the Holocaust.
Oh, my.
And her dad, they survived the Holocaust as little kids, and then they got married. They met and they got married, and they had this young woman with their daughter. And her father's sister died in a concentration camp. And her dad, I don't know if I can make this straight, the woman who was talking to me, when she was born, her father named her after his murdered sister that was killed by the Nazis. And he believed that his daughter was now, in a sense, the reincarnated soul of his sister. And so they gave her his sister's name. They gave her, she had to, they told her what her favorite color was. Everything he could remember about his little sister, she had to embody that. And she did. She didn't know any better. And then she said she started to rebel. And, she was an adult when she spoke to me. And she was struggling with her relationship with her parents because she felt this, she couldn't carry the burden of being this dead aunt anymore. So, I said to her, And I don't know why I said it. It wasn't like I'm brilliant. It just came to me, so I take no credit for this. And I said to her, well, how old are you? And she says, I'm just about to turn 49. And I said, oh, this is your Jubilee year. And I told her about the Jubilee, and I said, look, for 49 years, you carried this debt that either you owed or your father owed, or however you want to understand it, but you carried your dad's debt to his deceased sister. And you owed, for whatever reason, we'll say, you owed this debt to your aunt and to your dad and to your mom, and you carried it. But at 49, you're free. And that's what you're experiencing, is this spiritual transformation, psychic freeing that's happening in your being. And it's coming out as this need to reject or to rebel or to free yourself from the burden that your parents have placed upon you, and that this is your rebirth. And that you can explain it to your parents or not, but you have to go with this. This is not, I'm a bad daughter thing. This is, I'm coming into my own. I'm just going to discover who I really am. And I no longer have I don't owe anything to my dad or to his sister anymore. I've paid that debt, and I don't have to carry that burden or feel guilty about putting it aside now, because I've done it for the 49 years, and now I'm going to be free. And she was just, I know I never talked to her again, but she was so liberated by that understanding of the Jubilee year.
Well, you set her free, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I told her that, and she set herself free. But I mean, that's the power of these stories. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you found the Jubilee so powerful. But, we're going to be in the Hanukkah Christmas season. And we talked a little bit about Hanukkah. And, but I imagine most of your listeners are going to be celebrating Christmas. But if they're not celebrating the birth of the Christ within, they're not celebrating Christmas. They're just getting sucked in. They're celebrating something else, or they're getting sucked into the marketing of Christmas-based capitalism. And I love Christmas, and I love giving presents, and all of that. So go buy all you want. I don't care. But if Christmas doesn't include the birthing of the Christ within as a radical challenge to I don't want to overdo the metaphor here, but a radical challenge to the powers that be, the Roman emperor of your life, the ego or whatever it is. I mean, that's the glory of Christmas, is that this baby is the catalyst to bring down an empire. And even though the baby grows up to be crucified, it doesn't stop the revolution. So it's this opportunity for radical freedom, even as it goes to Easter, and that's another thing we could talk about, but can you dare to birth that Christ within? Can you make yourself, can you enter into the kind of poverty that the manger represents, that allows you to birth the Christ within? I mean, it's all Christian mystical stuff that I'm spouting here, but can that happen for you? And that's what the holiday is for. Advent is the time to sort of get ready to embrace that inner poverty, and by that I mean letting go of all the ideas that you've got, all the boxes that we were talking about before, until you have nothing. You're just in that poor state, and then give birth to the baby. And then see what happens. I mean, to let the revolution, the spiritual revolution happen within you and then ultimately around you. I mean, it's a great holiday. if people were brave enough to let it happen.
Yeah, and to have that level of consciousness be birthed within is certainly a very magical experience. There's no doubt about it. Don't recommend anybody walking on water unless it's frozen, but there is that awareness, that insight, that seeing the beauty in others that you might not have recognized before. There is absolute joy in that kind of experience, and you're right. I think that 1 year, a long time ago, my thing to myself was, I'm not going to buy any presents for Christmas for anyone. I'm going to make them. And I found that making gifts for people, for me, was a very rich experience. It meant hundreds of hours spent focusing on a person, making something for them that I thought that they would enjoy. And,
wow.
Whether it was writing something, whether it was knitting something or crocheting something or cooking something or whatever, I made sure that my gifts were of a personal nature, that I had spent time and focusing on them when I created them. And, aside from, I would love to say I was noble enough to just think it, but, poverty was the real impetus that got me going on this. But I felt so rich at the end of the Christmas holiday, because I felt that I had truly given of myself rather than putting something on a credit card that somebody would, kind of just shove in a drawer and never think about. So it was a fun experience. I buy presents for people now and stuff like that, but that 1 year I was at a point where I had nothing to give but me, and it was probably one of the richest Christmases I ever experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that.
But I think so many people get carried away with the commercialism that they forget the purpose. It's a time of light. It's a time of following a star. It's a time of reminding yourself of the light that is within. And the Christmas story is a beautiful story. There's no doubt about it. But there's more to the meaning of the holiday than just the Christmas story. And it's the same with Hanukkah. I mean, theoretically, they say it's the story of the oil in the lamp burning the 8 days for the rededication of the temple that had been destroyed and then rebuilt. And, that's a cool story too, but there's more to the story. There's a symbology there that is so important that we get so carried away with the story we don't think about the meaning behind it.
Yeah,
and,
one of the things I like about the Hanukkah story is, these things are probably more myth and legend than history, but one of the things I like about that story is they could have, they won the war, so there was no pressure to rededicate the temple that week. They could have waited a few days and pressed more oil. So, but they didn't. So what I liked about it was they decided, we don't have enough for the 8 days, but let's just do it anyway. So to me, it's the chutzpah, the daring to just go with what you got and let's just see how far we can push this, as opposed to waiting until it's a sure thing. So, part of the message is it's the dark time of the year. It's winter, or at least it is in Israel and North America. So it's the dark time of the year. You don't know what's coming next. You don't have enough light necessarily to get through, metaphorically. You're not going to have enough light to get to the springtime. You don't know. But we're going to take the light we've got, whatever that means, in people's hearts and people's minds. We're going to take the light we've got and we're going to burn as brightly as we can and just bring as much light into the world as we can for as long as we can. And in the story, it lasts as long as necessary. So it's like, just go ahead and burn and be as bright as you can, and don't worry about if you have enough, because you'll never have enough. Just go and do it. Not a Nike story, not just do it, but still, don't take a risk. Don't worry about don't wait until you're certain. There is no certainty. Just go ahead and do the best you can with what you got.
Well, that's true.
And get a pair of socks.
Yeah. Well, there's a tradition that people put candles in their windows, and at this time of year, and it's the dark time of the year, and I asked somebody, I said, do you know why you put that in the window? And they said, oh yeah, it's Christmas. And I said, I hate to break it to you, but the candle in the window is what during colonial times they would keep a light lit in the window to help people find their way home. And that's what the candles are for. And symbology, symbol-wise, certainly it symbolizes finding the light within, finding a way back home to source. I mean, there are a lot of things, but it has nothing to do with Christmas, actually. So
you're supposed to put the Hanukkah menorah in the window, so facing the street, so people can see the Hanukkah lights. I was never told that so people could find their way home. I was always told it was an act of saying, Jews live here. But where I live, I'm trying to think if there's any other Jews for miles around. I mean, my kids live miles away. I don't know if there's any Jews between us and them. So, there's no Christmas tree at our house. There's no Christmas lights, but we do have the Hanukkah menorah in the window. That's lit, at night.
Well, it's a beautiful symbol, and the different symbology that you put with each of the candles, I think, in your book was as impressive as it could possibly be, and questions that I understand that they're your questions and they're the questions that you ask, but isn't it wonderful that you have the flexibility to ask whatever questions you want?
Yeah, right. And it's sort of a way of making, in this case we're talking about Hanukkah, but making the holiday your own. And every year thinking, well, what are the 8 questions that need to be asked in my life or in my family's life? Or if let everyone ask their own question in a family. How interesting to hear, if you're brave enough to share them out loud, what are the questions you're asking yourself this year? What are the 8 questions that need to be answered maybe before the new year ends, or maybe as the new year is coming? What are the 8 questions that are going to help shape who you become in the mixing the Jewish calendar of Hanukkah with the secular New Year calendar? But that's an interesting way to look at it.
What are the questions? Yeah, what are the questions that are going to launch you into the new year and help you to be a better person?
Right. You said it better than I did. Yeah.
I had longer to think about it, but it just, to me, it really woke up another type of tradition that it applies to everyone. It's it's a Jewish it's a menorah and all of that, but it makes for a richer holiday, I think. I know that at Thanksgiving dinner, my family, my son and his wife and his children and her parents and me, at the dinner table at Thanksgiving, under our plates are questions that pertain to the last year about how have you changed your life, and what have you done that makes you richer?
That's
and
beautiful.
and so after we eat, we go around the table and answer the question, and they're all different. They're different for everyone, and it's always
that's fantastic.
It's always it's a wonderful tradition, and and they don't let you cheat. They don't put the questions under until your plate is full, so you have to eat your way through. But so you don't really have time to think. But it's a wonderful way of kind of doing a little bit of review, and okay, what has been important to me? What is the magic in my life that's here that wasn't here last year, and how did that happen? And it's always it's wonderful to be reflective, and then to focus on how do you use that reflection to sort of push you forward. Looking into the past is, there's nothing you can do about it. But if you're looking to the future, you create your own reality by your perception of it. So how are you going to change that perception to make it richer and more joyful, and help you to be a better person all ways round?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Yeah,
now, what
people would.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, people would do that, whatever their holidays are. Take them as opportunities to ask and answer deep questions. I mean, who would not look forward to the holidays?
Well, yeah, and it's just when you don't. Usually, people gather at holidays and funerals, and if you celebrate during the holidays in the right way, the funerals are easier to get through. It's definitely a time of great sadness for sure. But you had mentioned to that girl. I wanted to go back to what you said to that girl, because I didn't think that it was reincarnation was part of the philosophy.
In Judaism?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's Judaism has no official what happens after you die, but reincarnation is an option. There's nothing official. There's a reincarnation tradition. It's not the same as in like Hinduism, where you can reincarnate over and over and over and over and over again. If I remember correctly, I think I know it sounds funny, but I think it says you get 3 reincarnations, and if you haven't figured it out by then, you come back as a rock. You come back as a rock, and the only way you can start the cycle again is if a wise person sits on you, something like that.
My goodness.
Because Judaism doesn't have a fixed theology, no one takes these things literally. So you can make of that what you will. It's not like anyone goes, "Oh my God, I'm going to come back as a rock." So no one takes that literally. But
okay.
But yeah, I mean and even if it wasn't, that is part of Judaism, some strand somewhere. But even if it wasn't, that's what this woman's dad latched onto. So, for him it was as Jewish as it needed to be. It was just what he believed, that his daughter was his aunt reborn.
There was another thing in your book that I'm just pulling. Is there a belief that you only have so many words you're allowed in a lifetime?
That's a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov in the 1700s. The Baal Shem Tov, it's a teaching of his. It's not Judaism doesn't have a fixed, this is true. But he had this teaching to make a point, and his teaching was that every person is born with a fixed number of words to speak in a lifetime. And when you've spoken your last allotted number, that's when you die. And you're not the words themselves are up to you. It's the number that is fixed at your birth. And his message was, since you only have a fixed number of words to speak, before you say anything, make sure this is a word you want to die on, because it might be your last number word. So, if you want to die on "you jerk," that could be your last 2 words, as opposed to "love you." Which way do you want to go? So that was the message. I don't know if he meant us to take it literally, but I liked it. It's a great teaching. I like to teach it.
It's a great teaching. I wish some of the politicians believed in that.
Yeah.
It would make debates and things like that a lot shorter. No, I found that your book carried, promise but for the most part, it opened up the door to, there is such richness here. It just feels like it isn't taught appropriately. I mean, it's you say Judaism without tribalism. What do you mean by tribalism? Do you mean the religious aspect of it, or what do you mean by the tribalism?
So what I have in mind is, Jews are a tribal people. We're like, Cherokee and, Chippewa. We're a tribal people, and I'm very comfortable with that. That does not bother me at all. Tribalism is when you get to the point where my tribe is better than your tribe. That to me is a mistake. So that's tribalism. But when you say that it's not taught properly, I share that opinion. That's a bias. That's my bias. I think it isn't taught properly. I think what happened in my case, I'm in my 70s. So I was born in 1951. It was just 6 years after the end of World War II, the end of the Holocaust. We were just learning about the death camps, and we're still, so many decades later, you think, we're still in a state of PTSD over the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And so I was raised in a European Jewish environment that was really devastated by and reeling from the murder of 6 million Jews. And the response of our rabbis was to fixate, and this is just my guess, this is my sense of it, was to fixate on the outer form of Judaism. Let's make sure that everybody follows the rules. We don't have the luxury of doing the spiritual work now. Let's just get everybody on the same page with the rules. And then when we get the numbers back up and everyone's following the tradition, and then maybe we'll go and talk about these deeper spiritual things. That was the community I grew up in. It was Orthodox, but it was all about the form and not about the spirit. And so they didn't teach us anything that, in my estimation, they never taught me anything I could grow into as I got older, as I started asking questions, as I started having even as a teenager, having a desire for having spiritual questions and looking for spiritual experience, reading books about swamis and taking meditation classes from Buddhists and things like that. Where was that in Judaism? And it wasn't. I had one rabbi who was interested in this stuff, and he was fired from my congregation because they didn't understand him. So they were, and I'm not even criticizing them. It was maybe legitimate because they were in this time of dealing with this horrible tragedy. So they were doing the best they could to hold things together, focused on form. But a lot of people were looking for something else in the 60s and the 70s, and the Jewish establishment did not have it. And so people like me went elsewhere. We went to Buddhism, we went to Hinduism, we went to Sufism, we went to, wherever we went. Today, things are different. Today, a lot of rabbis, because they come out of the 60s and the 70s, and they were interested in that stuff, a lot of rabbis come now with some background in meditation, some background in Kabbalah, some interest in spiritual practice, and can do a deeper, can teach you the form, but can also teach you the hard work that goes with it. So it's not just outward stuff. So things may be changing. I don't know. I mean, I'm long retired, but my guess is the Jewish community that you were, adjacent to when you were growing up was one that was focused on the form and trying to deal with the Holocaust. But now it is changing. I mean, I have so many rabbi friends who are certainly as well educated in spiritual, mystical things as I am. But they have to do it on their own. It wasn't that we learned this stuff in rabbinical school or yeshiva or seminary. You have to go seek out the mystic teachers. And I was lucky. I mean, I found Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who was a great mystic from the old country, he escaped the Holocaust as a kid and came here. Escaped the Nazis.
But isn't that the case? Isn't that the case of everything? When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's true. I mean, otherwise you won't. If you're not ready, you won't even notice the teacher being there.
True.
I once brought Reb Zalman to my synagogue, thinking, if they like me, they will love him. And he came with the side curls and the beard. I have a beard, but he just came right out of central casting from a rabbi in Fiddler on the Roof. He was that kind of looking guy, and he was brilliant, and he's a loving man, and I, he was my teacher, so everyone was nice to him. But when he left, and he had gone back to wherever he was staying, my people came to me and said, "Never bring him here again. We hated this."
Oh my!
What they hated, what he scared them by the way he looked. Because what he taught was what I taught because I learned it from him. But I looked like them. He looked like their great-grandparents who died in the Holocaust. And it scared them. They said, "No, we don't want that. We don't want that. That's the Hasidic stuff. We're not interested in that at all. We're not Orthodox. We're very liberal. We don't want side curls, and we don't want to look at side curls." They were really,
oh dear.
They were very intimidated. They were very intimidated by him. So much so they couldn't hear him. They didn't even know what he was. They didn't listen. They couldn't open their hearts were so closed that their minds were completely clogged, or their hearts were so clogged that their minds were completely closed.
That's very sad.
Really unfortunate. Yeah, it is sad.
No,
but it was very educational for me because I realized, wow, I had no idea he would have that response.
No, I think I beat you age-wise because I was born in the 40s, and so what I did grow up with was Yes, very Orthodox Jews. Jews that walked to temple. They did not drive. They were serious people, and so serious about their traditions and their teachings that they were protective of them, almost as though they didn't. If they shared them, they'd lose them, type stuff. So.
There's always that. Sure, sort of a fear of the stranger too.
Yeah, and yet I was very, I was a child, and I was interested, and I really wanted to learn, and it was, I was shut out because I didn't fit in their box, and I still played with their kids and everything, but it wasn't appropriate for them to share any of their wisdom with me. So I had my own box that I had to fit into, which I didn't fit in. So, I did as you did. I went looking, and so this is an area where I adore the Old Testament, and I love the stories, and I love the symbology. You can the New Testament, just read the red stuff and you're okay. But the Old Testament is so rich and it has such wonderful flavor to it that that's where I've had years of pleasure just going through the Old Testament and speaking with people that have written about it and about the characters and everything. I just it's a part of religious spirituality that I have been eating up of late. So this all fits right in. It's just it was a joy to read the book, and it was a joy to even, as I said earlier, I don't normally read the appendixes, but I read yours, and I found it fascinating. I don't know why you made it appendix instead of not part of the book, but
yeah, I have no idea. I never know how these things come together. But,
unless somebody said you have to have an appendix, so you took the last 3 or 4 chapters and you stuck them in there.
I don't really know why they ended up as appendices. I really don't know. But it's always a mystery how I write a book and how it ends up getting published. Even though I've done 36 of them, it's like, how did that happen? I never really get it. But just talking about people who are open and people who aren't. I was in Israel a few years ago, and I was at one of these, sort of like, I guess you call them like shrines, and the intensity of the prayer that was going on there, and they were very Orthodox people, men and women, different sides, and they were praying, and there were these guys studying and arguing over the text like we were talking about before. And I'm always so fascinated by this. And these were people who do this all day. And so I walked over to this couple of these guys, and they were older men. And I asked them, I could start up a conversation. And they said, maybe, I don't know if I asked them what they were studying or what they were studying the Bible passage for the week, but I said, what commentaries were they reading? And they rattled off the standard ones, and they said, do you study? And I said, yes. And they said, well, what commentaries do you read? So I rattled off the mystical one, and they looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they just made a face, and they said, this is an English, I'm making it English vernacular, but they said, man, are you reading a bunch of crap? You got to read the normal guys. Don't read those crazy mystic guys. It's not really good for you. So not everybody is into the stuff I'm into.
Well, I think spirituality is everywhere, and it's so magic. I mean, it's so magical that I just find it fascinating where I find it. Sometimes I find it in the words of a song that is obviously a love song, and yet it also talks to. I mean, there's one, "Till There Was You," and to me that's a person's song to the divine. You know, I was lost and alone until there was you. And there was love all around, but I didn't hear it. I didn't feel it or hear it singing until there was you. So that it's sort of like when you recognize the divine and the divine within yourself, then you're, and this is a phrase, everybody is they will know what I'm about to say because I say it so often. Once you have that recognition, your life goes from black and white to technicolor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're quoting Beatles lyrics, but you could watch the movie Sister Act. You know, it's the same thing where they take, you know, pop songs and they can turn them into, you know, divine music. You can read Song of Songs in the Hebrew Bible.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was popular love poetry, and turn that into sacred music. So, yeah, it is all around you.
I think what gets to me is that there are spiritual messages all around you. You trip over them every day. And if you took the time to notice them, it would be an amazing education.
Yeah. And there used to be, and there probably still are, I shouldn't say used to be, but there are spiritual teachers all around us that we oftentimes just never really tap into or recognize. I remember, you can't do this anymore, but in Jerusalem, at the Dome of the Rock, which is, I think, the third holiest place in Islam, there was a time when non-Muslims could go and visit. And you could go inside the shrine and at the Dome of the Rock, and the rock itself was carved out, and there were stairs leading inside the rock. And this rock is supposed to be the rock from which Muhammad, peace be upon him, flew to heaven. And this is the rock that is supposedly the cornerstone, like of the planet. You know, this is a very holy rock. And I think it's maybe the rock that, I don't know if this is right, maybe Isaac was almost sacrificed on. It's got all kinds of mythology to it, but it doesn't matter. It was carved out, and you could walk down this short flight of steps and go into the rock, and you could look up through the top of the rock where they cut a hole and see the dome. It was just a gorgeous thing aesthetically. But there was this Sufi guy who sat inside the rock, and he would teach if you were interested, and teach just not official Islam, but just teach, you know, Islamic mysticism, teach Sufism, and he could do it in multiple languages, and you could sit just ask questions and learn from him, and it was this powerful thing to sit in the center of the universe, you know, mythologically, and listen to the teachings of the Sufis. And it was so powerful. Sadly, you can't even get in the building anymore because of politics and all the ethnic strife that people's idiocy has, you know, blanketed humanity with.
There's a story about the Dalai Lama. Somebody asked him who was his greatest teacher, and he said Adolf Hitler. And it took the questioner back and said, how could that be? And he said, you know, he taught me compassion and forgiveness because he chased him out of his homeland and everything. And it was sort of like, it made me stop and think about people that had given me, that sent me into conniption fits because they were mean to me or they were ugly to me and everything, and they were meant to teach me something, and I didn't really recognize it until much later. And now when somebody really, really pushes my buttons, I stop really fast and I say, okay, what am I meant to learn from this? Because it's not meant to make me angry. It's meant to teach me. And when I figured... Go ahead.
No, to say the message is what you're saying is right. I have to question whether the Dalai Lama said that about Adolf Hitler only because Adolf Hitler had nothing to do with the Dalai Lama being kicked out of Tibet. That was the Chinese.
Well, it was whoever kicked him out was his
Mao Zedong
or
that was
what?
The Chinese.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
maybe it was Mao. I don't know, but
his answer was, the guy that kicked him out of his homeland and took his all of everything from him, and it was that he taught him compassion and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I thought, when I heard that story, it was like, okay, so wait a minute, there are lots of people, not lots, there were a couple of people in my life that really irritated the bejeebers out of me. And it was like, why? What are they teaching me? What are they supposed to be teaching me that I am refusing to learn? And if you can stop yourself and think that way when something happens, first of all, they no longer bother you. And second of all, it teaches you an important lesson. If you're that resistant to learning it, it must be very important. So
yeah, that could be. Yeah, the Dalai Lama is an amazing character. I was once with him. I don't know if you ever got a chance to meet him. I was left. I was sitting next to him, and I couldn't say a thing. I had friends who were actually talking with him, and he was very open. And I'm sitting there going, hello. It's the Dalai Lama. What could I possibly have to say to His Holiness the Dalai Lama? I was completely dumbfounded.
Yeah, even given time, I'm not sure I would have the right words to ask an intelligent question.
Yeah, I don't know what I would ask. I have no idea.
A blessing, maybe?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. I could ask for a blessing. I did that once to a Swami, a Hindu Swami. I've forgotten his name now, and it was the same thing. But I thought just what you said. I couldn't come up with any conversation or a question, so I asked him for a blessing, and he said no. He said, "You don't need a blessing. You're already divine. Everyone's divine. What am I going to give you a blessing for? Wake up! It's God. You're all God."
Oh my!
I like that. That was a good answer.
Well, it's there are these people that we look to that we think are so that are sages, that are definitely teachers, and I think sometimes we forget that they're also still learning, and they're here, and they're here for a reason, and it's they haven't used their words up, or there's more that they need to do. And I mean, some of these Tibetan monks that intentionally meditate themselves to death, I think they're in need of help. But I do believe that the more you know, the more you are obligated to share.
I think you're right about that. I think this guy gave me a good answer. I think he was trying to teach me something. I don't think he was being rude. But
I agree with you. Well, that's why I named this show Nightlight. I figure that with the hundreds of books that I've read and people that I've had on the show, that every now and then, there's going to be a light that goes out there that touches people's hearts. And I just know that in the darkness of the times, a night light is always important. And not that I'm it, but that the information that is shared goes out there and, maybe touches somebody or wakes them up or gives them hope or gives them a new direction,
or
whatever.
Yeah. Or kindles the light inside of them, or knocks the whatever's. What did Jesus say? Put your light under a bushel, knocks the bushel away so you can see your own light. I mean,
No, it's.
I mean, ultimately, you have to be your own guru, but most of us are not prepared for that.
Well, I think that somebody once said to me that I should do this work full time. I taught special ed for 25 years, and my response was, well, when I learn as much as I'm supposed to learn, if there's anybody around that needs to be taught, I'll do it. And this person jumped on me verbally and said, no, you don't understand. It's your journey that is the teaching tool. And when I was ordained a long time ago, and when I did serve in the pulpit, I told people, I don't feel worthy of preaching to you, but I will share with you the mistakes I've made and the consequences thereof, so that you can make your own mistakes, and you don't have to repeat mine. And so it was sort of like, okay, along the way, this is how I learned this. This is the mistake I made. This is how I put 2 feet plus an arm in my mouth, and this is the consequences it had in my life. And it was always funny, because the lessons are always funny when you look back at them, not the moment, but when you look back, they have humor, and so it's it was a good message. Our journey is the way we teach. If once we arrive, there's no point. There's just another mountain to climb, but it's the journey that is so important, and if you can share that journey with other people and they can get something out of it, it's so important. I just noticed our time. My gosh, we talked through 2 hours.
Yes, we did.
I want to thank you so much. Is there a website you want to send people to, or someplace you want them to be able to contact you or check you out or whatever?
Yeah, you could go. My website is rabbirami.com, and my business website is oneriverfoundation.org. So you can go to either of those spots, and that's how you get in touch with me.
Also, you have that blogspot.com.
No, Blogspot, that doesn't work anymore.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, that's not.
Well, how
about
your podcast?
You can go to spiritualityhealth.com, and you can find the podcast there. It's there. I work for Spirituality Health magazine. You can also, you should subscribe to the magazine, and while you're at the bookstore getting the magazine, you can also pick up a copy of Judaism Without Tribalism. But I work for Spirituality and Health magazine, and you can subscribe to the magazine. The podcast is free, and you can get it at spiritualityhealth.com.
Fantastic. It's been such a joy to talk to you. I can't thank you enough.
Well, it was a delight, Barbara. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it was definitely my pleasure, and because you've written so many books, I imagine we'll have you back here to delve even further into a lot of this material. So thank you again for being here, and thank you everybody for listening, and please do check this book out. This one is special. You're going to want to read it and reread it and do a whole bunch of considering your life and your perception of how you are dealing with your reality. So good night, everybody. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.